You're listening to 99.1 WQRT LP Indianapolis, and this is Social Alchemy. This episode is part of the Social Alchemy Symposium, a participatory mini-conference that took place in New Harmony, Indiana. Conversations led by more than 20 notable authors, artists, designers, and philosophers from Indiana and around the world, exploring the role of utopian thinking. To listen to more archived episodes and find out more information about the Social Alchemy Symposium, please visit bigcar.org/utopia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I want to talk a bit about something we haven't talked about in terms of New Harmony yet, and that is New Harmony is in between two ley lines, two fault lines, and basically we also haven't talked about much on purpose because there's not a lot of information. But we're working on that in the future. But the indigenous population that was here before us being on their land, and what this land was used for, which was, from what I understand, ceremonial and burial mounds. So, you think about place and the energy that this place has in different places all over the world. And for a few years, several years, I've been working with an artist named, and actually in this building, if you go downstairs, they're monitoring the fault line and the activity on the fault line. You can actually see it on the computer down there. But one of the artists I've been working with over the years, LaShonda Crowstorm, her and I had talked quite a bit about ancestral memory. And they're starting to talk about how memories and traumas and information is actually passed down through our DNA, and they are finding, scientific evidence to back this up. So in relation to New Harmony, part of, there's another artist I'm working with currently, Docey Lewis. She's a descendant of the Owen family who really transformed our world. So, a lot of people also don't know, Owen created the cooperative, grocery store movement, and there's all kinds of things. So I think about Docey and her work and in terms of what she pulls forward from her ancestors. And then with Lauren Curry, executive director of Indie Dance Movement Collective, her and I have worked together a lot lately on different projects. And the other thing I was talking about with an artist, Elisa Harkins, was embodied knowledge, and how performers and how dancers and actors and actresses have this embodied knowledge where they're working with their bodies, and where does that come from? It's not always planned. It's not always choreographed. Or where does the choreography come from? This sort of embodied knowledge. And this, I've worked with Sean, also known as Oreo Jones, also known as Michael Raintree, connected again to New Harmony Raintrees for I don't even know how many years now. He's our WQRT station manager. And I see Sean, he can just flip, he just will turn into a different persona, when I've seen him perform or so it's interesting to me to think, have Sean contribute in this way and think of him as not just my colleague at work, but as this performer who has embodied knowledge. And then Miss Dixson, she's the executive director of the Santé Art Institute. Mm-hmm. She is like a goddess and someone I have always looked to and admired, working in the arts. And I always even during the pandemic, we'd be on Zoom calls and I'd be trying to look at her to see, what she was trying to think about, what she might be thinking about. But and for 20 years, do you want to, let's start with our goddess and talk a little bit about you and your practice.
I have been with Asante Art Institute almost since the beginning. It was the idea of Deborah Asante in 1990 to create a space where young people could safely explore their gifts, their art, their culture. Now we would say their superpower. But there needed to be some place where Black children could just go and not be judged because of their color, and that they could learn history, true history, and that they could take all of this knowledge and experience that they gain from being in the village of elders, take it and then allow it to come through them in an art form. Performing arts, acting, singing, dancing, storytelling. We also use the literary arts, and now we're using the visual arts to ground Black children in their culture, because we know that melanin is their superpower. And if they listen to the world will tell them, no, that's not it. And that is really ugly. And because you have that melanin, you're not intelligent. You can't learn. And they get these negative messages just because of that. So our job is to help them unlearn and not hear those messages, that they can navigate whitewater and be successful in their Black body. We use the arts for that. And I've been with Deborah Asante, and Asante, it was formerly Asante Children's Theater. I've been with her since 1991, 92, when my son was introduced to that program.
Do you want to talk a bit about your form, and what you're doing now, Trees and...
Yeah. So I moved to Indianapolis in the early 2000s, around 2005. I came from a rural small town of Warsaw, Indiana. For school, essentially, is where I started for education. And I've been in bands in high school and been in music and DIY communities the majority of my life. But I started taking music seriously once I moved to Marion County. In that journey, I really fell in love with hip hop. I began to write a lot, and I was very lonely because I did not know anyone. I didn't know community. I didn't understand it. I was still so young. But yeah, and then it evolved over the years, and I began to just explore and learn more about my city and just the thriving and potent hip hop community in the city of Indianapolis. And from there, I've been on tours and played tons of shows, met some amazing people. And then that essentially led me to here and opportunities working, with different people, organizations. In 2015, I created a hip hop festival called Trees in Fountain Square. I lived in Fountain Square around 2010 and was one of the artists that was unfortunately kind of priced out of that neighborhood. But that was where I feel like I saw a change in our city and for me and our community, in that there was a lot of musicians, a lot of artists working together to create their own landscape, because the majority of our lives, I feel like we've been told no, or it just seemed unquestionable. And trying to create a space for us to be able to create and feel heard. So yeah, Trees began in 2015. It was, a very important time in my life, and I feel like in just the music scene in general in Indianapolis, where there was a lot of venues in the city that would not play rap. There'd be no bills for rap musicians or just performers. So I took it upon myself to help with others to work to create a space where we can all collaborate and be heard. So yeah, that has evolved over the years and became one of the biggest hip hop festivals in the Midwest in Fountain Square. Unfortunately, COVID shut that down for the time being. But it's been cool to be able to navigate and kind of put on a community organizing hat, and that, at first, being a musician, you are forced to look within yourself, and you're working for yourself, and you're trying to navigate selfishly to achieve what you want to do. But I think it's been really important for me as an artist to be able to go and explore and work with others. And the radio station too, a Big Car has a low-powered radio station, 99.1 WQRT, and that has been a really cool project to help facilitate and create dialogue, and it kind of goes beyond just being an artist myself. So, yeah, I kind of went on a rant there, but yeah, that's me.
Do you want to?
My turn. Okay. So I moved to New Harmony in 2003 to simplify my life, I thought. I had a complicated life that started as a studio artist in San Francisco in the textile scene in the late 60s and early 70s. I took a weaving class, and I was studying English and anthropology in college, and I said, that is not what I want to do. I want to weave. And I started as a solo act doing woven art, and I became a little bored with that. I needed a broader perspective, and I wasn't getting it as an artist in my studio. And most of my life has been the result of an opportunity shows up, and I almost always grab the brass ring and take the opportunity. And I had a neighbor who was involved with Asian refugee resettlement program in San Francisco, and asked me if I wanted to partner with them to have a studio that would involve the Asian refugees, many of whom, all of whom were women in my universe, but had a textile history of some kind. So that got me started working with a different kind of population, and that was like 1975. I loved it. I loved the interaction. I loved the collaboration. And, one of the messages here at this conference is collaboration. So many of us are artists ourselves, but without collaboration, you sort of wither on the vine. You need to be involved with the broader population. And I really am grateful that New Harmony gets now this reset in the state of Indiana with all these cool people who are doing amazing things. And we don't have to stay in our ivory tower here. We can participate and bring our gifts to a broader audience. Fast forward, and my complicated life, which ended up being part of an organization called Aid to Artisans, and I personally worked in 45 countries over about 25 years after setting up a factory in the Philippines and running that, and it being in an earthquake, and I have a lot of stories. And now, just to focus on what happened during the pandemic and sort of post-pandemic, it's been a guilty pleasure to get back to a studio practice, but I need to tie it into this broader, the need to collaborate. So I'm working on an exhibit with Big Car, in November. And all of the materials I'm using for that exhibit are a partnership with village groups, with organizations I've worked with over the years. So I've got a lot of hand-spun yarn, cocoons from Madagascar, a whole variety of raw materials that allow me to hold hands with those partners. And that's what I like to do. So I do it at various levels here in New Harmony. And then I got sucked into the organizations here, happily sucked in. The New Harmony Clay Project, we sort of hatched that together with the Blaffer Foundation and Lenny Dowie and Annie Dowie and their foundation. And I find that I don't have to run things. I can be part of, I can do my little part. I can understand the intention that it takes to get something off the ground. I was talking to David Rubin yesterday. I don't know if he's still here, but his theory of everything really resonated with me. And I was thinking a lot about that. How can all the organizations in New Harmony who are doing tons of spring strategic planning, each group on their own, how can we coalesce and push the vision forward together? And I was looking for the theory of everything. What is that one thing that we all share that might allow us to move our broader visions together? And it's about intention. And it's a little bit about the utopia in each of us that need to connect. And for me, utopia is connecting with even not like-minded people, but just people that live in and around your area, and how you can think of everybody as somebody on their best day. Don't think of them as the enemy. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Docey.
My name is Lauren Curry. I'm the executive director of Indie Movement Arts in Indianapolis, and that's kind of it. I don't really want to talk about myself because I'm more excited by the people that I'm sharing this panel with, and I'm more excited by the people that I'm sharing this room with, so I want to make more space for conversation.
I don't know, Lauren. I chose you for a reason. I think you're underselling yourself. Lauren's pretty amazing. And you do think about the world in a way that I think needs to be heard. So I do want you to talk about yourself if possible, please.
I honestly, I don't know. I think why I'm really grateful to be here is because I've been thinking a lot about, in preparation for this event, how do we create those, yesterday at the architecture talk, those aspirational spaces? Because is utopia possible? Who even knows? But I know that I feel it when I go to work at Indie Movement Arts. I love what I do, and I believe so fervently in my organization. And part of the reason for that is because we have belly dance, we have Bollywood, we have a somatic movement practice, we have traditional kind of European and Western derived modern class, we have Tai Chi, we have all these different communities under one umbrella. And I think for me, that is where utopia becomes operational, is these specific communities being able to come together and move forward, like you were saying. And but the other part of it, the other side of it, like I was asking of the talk today about the cultural trail, is how does that practically happen? Where does the money come from? Who pays for it? And I have kind of a different relationship to money than a lot of executive directors. I have a full-time job at a bakery, so my organization doesn't it kind of cuts two ways. It doesn't have to sustain me, but I also don't get to be sustained by it. And that presents a lot of freedom and a lot of challenges. And I think what I really want to talk about in the arts in general, but here today as well, is the artist's relationship to money and the artist's relationship to funding and cultural production's relationship to money, because utopia certainly doesn't happen without money. Hopefully once it happens, then we leave the money behind. We got to have the money to get there probably. So I hope we can talk about that today, and that's it.
Well, so that does bring, this panel is about really using art to heal yourself, and in that process, potentially helping heal others, because you're sharing it. You have an audience, and someone connects to it in a way. But that does lead to, there's different things we have to process. And there is an emotional expense, there is a physical expense to that, like you said, and there is this expectation that we live up to a stereotype of starving artists. So can you, which means, I don't know if you all have that. I have a little rage sometimes on that. So can you talk a bit about art, to heal yourself? And we'll start with Ms. Dixon, processing, rage and, access to healing yourself after expending all this energy, or maybe those are three different questions we can...
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. Well, let me go back to your comment about Lashana Crowstorm, whom I also know. It was interesting when you made the comment about her and what she felt here. And it was also interesting in the comment that you made, which I did not know, about the Native American connection. But I knew when I arrived in this space that something was not right with my spirit. And it wasn't as intense for me as it was when I was in New Orleans and was walking around and happened upon this space that really, really disturbed me. And I just could not get unsettled until I removed myself from this area. And when I got back to my hotel and I was talking about it with the concierge, he said, "Oh, it sounds like you were at Congo Square." In case you don't know about Congo Square, that is where the port where they were bringing the captured Africans in and preparing them for auction. So our DNA, our memory, that memory of that experience hit my spirit. It's not as bad here, but now I understand my discomfort about this space because Native Americans were uprooted, and something very terrible happens to your energy, to your spirit, to your body when you are uprooted from your homeland. When it comes to healing, for me as an artist, I've had the privilege of working with Prince Julius Akambi Adeniyi. He's a Nigerian-born Yoruba man who trained me in Yoruba culture. I use the drum for healing, and music for healing, and singing for healing, and try to share that when I have the opportunity. As an arts administrator, I wear two hats, artist and then administration. So I have to balance, which makes me a little bit cuckoo. To me, there's an art to life. There's an art to living. How do you use art? How am I incorporating art in everything that I do? In how I speak, in how I look, in how I conduct and carry out my life, and how do I pass that art form of life on to young bodies that are following in the footsteps? How do I use the wisdom that I have gained from lived experiences to share with others so that their lives may be enriched and that they also enrich mine? So the drum is a very, very powerful source for me to just sit and listen to my ancestors and their voice coming through the drum. And Jim, you're right. This is a place of grounding and earth, and I am of the earth. So that the goat skin or the cowhide on the wood, and then me connecting with them and exchanging energy with Mother Earth, that is the healing for me. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. So, Sean, like thinking about those things, and you were talking earlier about there was like a big pushback against hip hop shows in Indianapolis, and really probably in a lot of cities. Why do you think that is? Do you think this is tied into processing? I'll let you talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're in a red state. It's Indiana, and yeah, it's Black culture in general is something that's intimidating to the powers that be. But yeah, it's just a process that unfortunately we have to walk through and work through and try to push through. And it's hard as an artist to use that energy when you could harness that and focus that on creating. And I've always came from the mindset that if the space isn't for me, then I'll just try my hardest to create it for others. And I think that's very important. And that's helped me not only just working with other people, but healing as well, and learning. We're talking about the healing aspect. I thought that was interesting, because the process for me as an artist, I've been trying to lately not write or create through trauma, because I feel like that is something that I have unfortunately had to, it's like a well sometimes for me, where I seem to create when I'm going through some of the hardest times, or just through workshopping that. And I think it's an important thing to realize and try to look through, because ultimately how I create is my therapy. It is my antidepressant, is my healing. When I'm composing, when I'm writing stuff, through keys and drums and lyrics especially, I think it's important to realize that is a gift that I am able to harness and use. And nothing really so far in my life has filled that void. No drug or anything can ever touch that energy, I feel, that can help and heal me. So yeah, I kind of went all over the place there again, but.
Can you talk a little bit more about your being on stage and the different personas and the physicality of being on stage performing, how that is for you? How does that feel? Are you in your are you in your body? Are you?
No, I don't think so. It's pretty impossible to even articulate or even describe. But I know that there's no feeling in the world that I can compare it to. And I kind of just, it's ancestral, just conjuring spirits, and kind of just zoning out into the 1,000-yard stare. But I'm going to somewhere that, isn't here, I think, to me.
Yep, you do.
And then Docey, so you were talking, thinking back to your connection with both commerce, setting up the factories, and then thinking about Robert Owen. Is it intentional, like in your mind, to kind of bring this back around into current times, like that whole textile, and then this balance of basically communism and capitalism. It's a kind of a little seesaw that you're undertaking with that project.
Sure. So I am a capitalist. I confess I have never actually written a grant for my own work. I've always figured it out in terms of how can I make this creative or pay for itself one way or the other. And so I've been involved with two main businesses where I created something. I did get venture capital partners my first time around when I set up a factory in the Philippines. But I was sort of, I was raised in a New England, in boarding schools, and I was privileged, but I was on scholarship, so I felt I sort of knew what it was like to have a privileged background, but I always felt a little bit out of it because my family had run out of money. It was one of those, blue blood families that ran out of the trust funds. So I was forced to put on a business hat of some kind. But the message that I grew up with was, you've got to do something to benefit other people. And that came down through my mother, my grandmother, my mother, the Owen side. We were told a lot of stories about Robert Owen when I was a child. And the one thing that really resonated was his interest in educating children. So when I first set up my project in the Philippines, my first day in the Philippines, I had breakfast with President Marcos. Just to give a little flavor to opportunity and doors opening. And I joined the Philippine American Chamber of Commerce, and there were 2 or 3 people in that chamber that shared my vision and really believed in education. So we made that a part of my first studio. We would send all the children to the weavers that I worked with to school. And in fact, my first location was at a school. I rented a building from the Easter School, and they had a weaving program as well. It was an Episcopal school, and I had the church basement, which was about the size of this space. That morphed into some other projects, like we bought a pig, and we owned the pig together. The priest of the Episcopal Church butchered the pig. He knew how to do that, and for that, he took the leg of the pig. But the rest of the pig we distributed among the weavers and their families, and we had a whole ceremony, and it was a cooperative venture to bring your garbage in to feed the pig. And the pig lived at our house, and somebody came and washed the pig every day. I mean, it was really fascinating. But we all ate the pig at the end of the Easter season. And then that had worked out so well that we did a rice co-op. So we started doing these things that the people that I worked with needed and wanted, and it was kind of an organic, it developed out of need, and it taught me a lot about sharing and so forth. Fast forward to Nepal, I became a partner there with a paper making company, and it ended up being a wallpaper making company, handmade paper and woven paper and a bunch of things. Anyway, we were able to be successful enough that we set up an entire program in a community in the Himalayas, rented a private monastery, restored it, built a bed and breakfast, did organic gardens. We sent all the children to school. We educated. At our peak, we had 2,000 artisans working with us. We sent 180 women to college. They got college degrees, became teachers and nurses, and it all seemed like perfection. We've done it. We've got this community. Then an earthquake happened, and the whole thing kind of came tumbling down. And you didn't ask me to speak to this, but I would say we probably all share successes we've had, and we're like, yay, we've done it. And then it goes away. For one reason or another, something happens, and it makes you feel like you're just a conduit for some greater energy that can be positive, it can be negative, but it's always about change. You can't hang on to it. You have to be prepared for what comes next, whatever it is. But I'm grateful that I'm still connected. I'm sort of a hoarder of all of my experiences, and I draw on that, and I keep in touch with people I worked with 30 years ago, and they are my wellspring, those relationships, and it helps me to imagine how I can go forward from here, this challenge with our climate and with our inability to bridge the diversity gap. It's a chasm between us and many people here. How do you bridge that gap? You just have to go with the flow, trust the process, hold the intention.
Lauren, can you talk a bit more about, well, first of all, you're teaching, you're running an organization, also wearing two hats. Do you have different personas that you're working through, or however you want to talk about it, channeling? But then also, that goes back to, tying it back to, you're putting all this time and energy into this work, and it comes at a cost. It comes at the cost of financial stability. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, so I think trying to bring these two ideas together, that for me, my life is, I'm very fortunate. I don't have I have a houseplant, but I don't even have a cat that I need to support. Some people are out here with whole children, so they can't really be like having bullshit jobs and like doing art on the side like I do. And so having different personas and being able to do that and carving out the space in my life to do that and being around other people who are like that, that's kind of my small specific community where I find the most energy and the most generative creativity. And then those people, like me and my co-director, Bethany Bach, we both have lives that are like slightly irregular in whatever way, and our relationship to money is slightly irregular, so that we put that energy into the organization. And then the organization now has the resources that are not necessarily money, but is like our labor to create space for other small specific communities to come together. So our Tai Chi class can come together, our embodied dance class can come together. And even though they're kind of just dance classes, when you step into a class, any class, but I think really at our organization, what you are seeing is a group of people who are a small population, a small community. I feel like I'm using the word community a whole lot, but you know what I mean. And there is something about one of, the fact that I have to have different personas, but in some way I enjoy that. And that is what makes the other thing possible. And I think we've all talked about the space to create and the space to heal ourselves. And what is meant by space so often is like somebody had to make that space, whether you had to make it yourself, whether it's whether you know, Miss Dixson, when you took that trip, like you were making space for yourself to regenerate as an artist, I'm sure as an administrator. You were making spaces like in countries I've never even been to, and with money that I'm sure I'll never see, and all of these things are, you know, we all up here as artists have that driving engine in us to make the space, whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for others. And I think that is also the engine that's behind this utopian idea, is that you have to have the resources to do it, and also kind of like a core of people that will move it forward. So I guess in terms of different personas, that's my answer, is that one of my personas is being the person to make that space. And that's very important to me. And it comes at a cost, but it also comes back to me. And when I see how much our classes mean to people, it definitely comes right back. So, and I'm very fortunate in that. I know that a lot of people at their jobs, their energy just goes away, but mine continually feeds back. And I guess that's part of utopia for me as well, is how can we make spaces in our lives? How can we create a wing of our existence where our energy isn't just going out and our labor isn't just going out, but it's coming back as well? And I don't know. I don't even know what I just said, but
I think it was great. It was great. But I just want to say, like, when you performed at Tube Factory most recently, your mom came up to me and she was like, "Oh, I finally get to see Lauren perform. She usually never tells me she's getting ready to perform." And I was like, "Why is that, Lauren?" Like, but that does make me think, is like, when you perform, is like, what are you, like, are there times you want to share certain things with certain people and not like how do you?
That's really interesting. I am the kind of performer that I'm actually really not great at performing. And I think partly it's because I'm always thinking about how to get it done. And I'm always thinking about money and practicalities and logistics. And being a dancer, it's like not very compatible with like being a dancer. So I have trouble getting to that place that Sean was describing. And I think that's why I don't perform as much. I really prefer to make the space for other people. But yeah, I would love to hear more about, because everybody up here, I think, has that tension between your creative energy and the practicalities of like getting it done, of making the space, of like, oh my God, how many decades with Asante and the Art Institute and I feel like only very recently has the Art Institute been getting the flowers that it deserves. And like, how did you create the buy-in? Because I'm sure there are people who would rather not see an ascendant, predominantly Black arts institution. I want to talk about how do you move these mountains and get these things done? Because that's why I'm a bad dancer, I guess, is to connect all of that back.
There's something to be said about doing what you can with what you got, when you can, and sticking to that. If we were not diligent about our village, and when I say our village and our community and diversity, when I talk about anything, Black, African American, colored, Negro, whatever you want to label you want to put on it. I am talking about me and people who look like me. I'm talking about Black bodies. If I don't make me a priority and the children that I represent a priority, nobody else will. If I don't look out for them and make sure that they're fed spiritually, mentally, physically, nobody else is going to do it. So we had to be very diligent about that business. It is only recently that this narrative of serving communities that are marginalized, hell, we always been marginalized. That doesn't make us less than. I think Diamond made a point this morning when he said, just because you think that we don't have, doesn't mean that we think we don't have. You can talk to plenty of Black people who grew up who would say, I never knew I was poor, but people said I was poor and came from a poor community, but I didn't know that. We existed long before white bodies showed up. Our civilizations were there long before that. And so now you show up to tell us, oh, you need to be educated this way. No, I don't. Many roads to the mountaintop. There are many roads to the mountaintop, and why should yours be the best one for me when I've been traveling my road on my journey and it's been fine for everybody? You have to be diligent about who you are and why you are in this world. When it became popular to serve marginalized communities, that is when Asante skyrocketed. We scored, this was amazing to me. We applied for a grant. I will not say what place it was with, but we applied for a grant. Same language, same work. We've been doing it for 30-something years. Same thing. And they came back and said, oh my God, you guys scored the highest score. No shit. You changed your rules, and now our goals fit your rules. But we're still doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that has been common all across. So now that George Floyd and this awareness about systemic racism and white supremacy and, oh, we got to do better and we got to live better, that is the only reason. But we as Black people, we make something out of nothing because we have to. Mm-hmm. We serve our needs because we have to. One thing, Brian is sitting in front of me, and I have to say this. If it were not for him, in 1990-91, when I came to Deborah as a parent, and I'm watching her work, she's phenomenal when it comes to working with children and pulling out what they didn't even know they had inside them. She's just incredible at doing that. That's all she wants to do is the art. I come along and I'm saying, girl, wait now. Do you realize, because of where I worked, I'm saying, do you realize what you're doing? And do you realize what a difference this makes? And do you realize there are organizations out in the community serving these very kids that you're working with and taking credit and getting money? You should be getting the money too. We were working out of our pocket from 1991 when I came until 2003. Do the math. And we were producing shows. We had a company that people thought we had money, but we were working out of our pocket. Brian knew Deborah and then met me, and he comes along and says, how are you guys doing this? How are you making this work? And you came to a show, and you said you were going to leave at intermission, but he didn't. Because he was so taken in by the talent that was on stage and the space that he was in and what he observed, that it touched his spirit. That's what I believe. It touched his spirit. Now his spirit tells him, you got to do something. You got to do something. And that's when he asked the question, how can I help? Never tried to direct or anything, but how can I help? Subscribe to what you're doing. How can I make it happen? That was the jump that we needed in order to get our work off the ground from grassroots and start moving and building infrastructure so that we could be successful at this institution that we were growing. So stay the course. Stay true to yourself. And for us, that means staying true to African and African American customs and traditions and teaching those. I firmly believe that our children are better when they know where they come from, when they know who's there, who they belong to, and when they understand their responsibility and context within the world. They are not minority. They are part of the majority. And when they understand that, they then can take on a higher degree of responsibility. And they're not afraid.
Come on. Okay. Okay. Does anyone have any questions?
You mentioned something that is really spoke really poignantly to me about how your work all of a sudden became very trendy and you started having a lot more success. I think
We didn't have more success, we had more money.
I think like the underbelly of all of these kinds of experiences, like, is that it's funded by money, and like for those of us that are disinterested in pursuing money as like a goal in life, this work is almost like necessary trauma to get to the part of life that we like. And I'm curious, like everybody here I think has gone through a different angle of like getting funding for projects that we believe in, knowing what it's like. Like, do you guys have any, even if it's just like a spitball, like thoughts about what funding models that help people on the ground in ways that like will be more sustainable than like passive popularity that, you know, like shines a light on one particular angle of your work? Like, is there a better way to like make these processes more equitable in a generalized way?
Going through this world thinking you don't need money is like, that doesn't register with me. You have to have money. You have to have resources beyond money in order to carry out your ideas or your thoughts. I know what it feels like to operate with no money, but the job still got done. I know what it feels like to operate with low money. The job still gets done. Why? Because the need is there. When you have money, it doesn't make the job less than, it makes it easier. Because now you can bring other bodies into the formula. You can bring other bodies into the process. That makes it easier. Now, I don't like working hard. So I've had to learn how to ask the right people for money, because that's what I need. Or I need a building, I've learned how to ask for that now. And, you know, Miss Asante, she'll still say, I want to do the art. I don't know how to ask. Oh, I do. I have no problem. I have no problem. If you got something and I need it and I want you to share. You know, tell me no.
If I could jump in, Rob, I think that's a great question. And I think I very much relate to the first couple decades of Asante's existence is kind of what IMAC is living and working now. We don't have any money. And most of the people that are on staff are not actually on staff. We do the work because we love it, because we feel that it's needed, and we feel that it's important. Mm-hmm. And the hope is that eventually someone recognizes that. Mm-hmm. But even if nobody ever does, we're not I would rather work that job every day for the rest of my life than play the lottery. So I'm going to work that job because it is coming back to me. And that is it's not a good answer because it's not like, I don't know how to say, here is a model by which you can have a non-capitalist or like a supplicant relationship to money and funders and still get your work done. But what I can say is that I think if you stay the course, if you stay true to what you believe in, the spaces will be created. There are people like Sean who are making this space either for themselves or for others. Like, I think Treese is revolutionary because a music festival, a hip hop and rap music festival in Indianapolis, that is like a small, specific, but dedicated cultural node that then creates waves and it creates change. And I would love to hear the story of how that got off the ground as well, because I'm sure it wasn't easy. But the ripples that it creates, I mean, they're still being felt today. There's more venues, there's more hip hop in Indianapolis, and that's it. That's the answer, or it's an answer.
Can I make one comment about the importance of the creative economy and how, I'm not crazy about politics, but the metrics that go with the creative economy need to be translated and brought to the attention of our politicians, and we need to make noise about the importance of the creative economy, how much it contributes to the value of living in Indiana. And fast forward to our AI-dominated future, I'm a real fan of the UBI, Universal Basic Income, which for artists in Norway already exists. If you are an artist in Norway and can prove that that's what you do, you get, I think it's something like $3,000 a month. I mean, it's enough to make a huge difference in your life. So in my utopia, universal basic income is universal whether you're creative or not. But can you imagine how many people would be creative if you had a UBI? I mean, let's envision that.